Hey, fourth grade friends, we are dividing using area model with a 3-digit dividend divided by a 1-digit divisor. So we know that if you are using long division, which they won't be using until middle school, so they have to use partial quotients and area model in 4th and 5th grade. But your long division would look like this. And again, I would just tell them to box it in and then come over and box in their entire dividend, because that will remind them this is in the box here, it needs to go in the box here. So we have our 8 as our divisor. We have a 3-digit dividend, so we're going to need 3 columns. And the dividend goes in the first column, again giving yourself space above and below to regroup and subtract. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you could you could divide 864 divided by 8. So first is an easier way if you are not 100% on your 8 times tables. So I know that I'm going to look at the greatest place value for 864, and the greatest place is in the hundreds. So when I start my 8s, I'm going to start with 8 times 100 because this is in the hundreds place. And 100 is always very simple to multiply. So 8 times 100 is 800. That's great. It's really close to 864. But what if I tried 8 times 200? Well, the basic fact is 8 times 2, which will be 16. But then we multiply the 16 times 100. And that would give us 1,600, which is way too much for our 864. So we will begin with 8 times 100, goes on the top of the area model. And 8 times 100, we subtract 800 from our dividend, and we have 64. Well, we know that 64 is not a reasonable remainder because 64 is way bigger than 8. And we are going to circle, and we are going to move it, and we're going to keep dividing. Again, if I know my 8s, this could be a lot easier for me. So I can come over here, and I know that 64 is a multiple of 8. So I know that multiplying 8 times 8 will give me 64. So I can come over here and put 8 times 8 equals 64, and I can subtract. That will give me a remainder of 0. With a remainder of 0, I do not need to continue to divide, leave it alone. So I come up and I add my partial quotients to get my quotient, and that would be 108. Then I would multiply 8 times 108 and see if that equals my dividend, and we'll do that in a moment. Okay. Another way is, again, if you are really good at your 8s, going to do the same thing, filling in your area model. Gonna start over here again with my 8s. Now this time, I know that I started up here in the hundreds because I needed to help out by multiplying by tens, hundreds, or thousands, because I know that's a lot easier to start with. But with this one, I'm not going to start with 8 as the hundreds. I'm going to start with 8 to see if 8 is a multiple of 8. And we know it is, because 8 times 1 equals 8. So I can use 8 times 1. But 8 times 1 is 8. This is 864. So I need to come back over here and say, okay, if I have 8 times 10, that will give me 80. Not even close. Now I'm going to try 8 times 100. That will give me 800. That's what I want. So now I have to come back over here because we need to make sure it's not going to be 8 times 1. It's going to be 8 times 100. Then we subtract, and we get 64. And we bring it over to subtract again and divide. So again, we know that 8 times 8 is 64. So we are going to use 8 times 8 is 64. Subtract, there's no remainder. Add our partial quotients, and we still have 108. So when I check it with multiplication, again, we're going to multiply 8 times 108, and those combined should equal our dividend. So to do 8 times 108, we have to use the area model because we are not using standard algorithm for multiplying either. So we will draw the area model to multiply 8. And we have a 3-digit factor, so we have 3 columns. Remember, when we are multiplying, we expand and decompose. So this is going to be 100. That's a 0, which we really don't need. And then this is 8. So we multiply 8 times 100, is 800. 8 times 0, which we could have left that one out, is 0. And then 8 times 8 is 64. We add and we get 864, which is our dividend. So that checks. Next, we will divide a 4-digit dividend by a 1-digit divisor.